Can you help us understand on a ladder what is most important to the group of AGs?
Well, we announced on Friday that, and it's important to remember, this is a bipartisan group of attorneys general leading the investigation, 9 in total. And we're looking at the history of Facebook, how it's grown, its acquisitions, how that has affected competition, and really looking at how consumers have been affected. And we will use the lawyers in all of our offices, work together, and make sure we're communicating with the DOJ as we pursue this investigation.
Is the coalition of AGs, I mean, the reason that it exists, is it a comment on what has or has not been accomplished by either Congress or federal agencies?
I think it's a comment on the abilities of our individual offices, the legal talent, the laws that we have at our disposal in terms of going after when there may be antitrust concerns. And we all have common ground in that. I can tell you that in looking at the numerous acquisitions of Facebook, they've focused on companies that may not have been big enough at the time to have triggered review. And in hindsight, we need to make sure there wasn't intent to subvert free markets and competition. And that's what we're focusing on. That's what our lawyers are looking into. And it's not a normal practice for attorneys general to come out and start talking about investigations when they're launched. At least in my office in Florida, that's not something that we regularly do. But over time, as there have been numerous concerns with privacy, as consumers give up more of their privacy in order to use these social networking applications, we want to make sure that consumers and Floridians and the other states know that we're looking into this, and we will use all the tools at our disposal.
Historically, antitrust is centered on keeping prices low for consumers. With a lot of these tech companies, prices are low. With Google and Facebook, it's free if you don't account for the data as being counted as labor versus just exhaust. Do you think this will rewrite the standard for antitrust as you look at this? And how do you kind of reconcile that with the historic test for antitrust?
And you have identified the key difference in this antitrust approach. These platforms are supposedly free. I would argue they're not free at all. In fact, as Facebook has become larger and larger and larger, you look at what the price really is. The price of relinquishing more of your personal information, the higher price that are demanded for advertising, the higher number of minutes you have to focus on ads in order to use the product. And so our definition of price and how we gauge whether or not that price has been affected within this growing alleged monopoly, we have to look at it through a different lens than we have traditionally.
People are looking at former coalitions of AGs and the way in which they tackle things like tobacco and pharma and mortgage lending. Is there a case study that you're trying to model this group after?
Well, as with the last question, you can see this is an entirely different way of looking at whether or not we are dealing with a monopoly. And what that means is we have to bring the resources together of all the states that have the capability to do that. Not every state has the talent or the size in order to dedicate resources to this issue. But I can tell you that Florida is committed to making sure that consumers are protected and that we do, in fact, have competition among these social networking platforms.
You know, you mentioned resources. The federal government is already expending some of them as well in similar investigations, both at the FTC and the Department of Justice. Is there any overlap or cooperation between the states and the federal government, or are you duplicating efforts that you don't necessarily need to be duplicating?
Well, I can tell you anytime we have a number of states that get together and lead these investigations, it is to prevent duplicating effort that we don't need to duplicate. We have met with the Department of Justice. We will continue to share information as we work through this investigation, and depending upon what we ultimately find, that may indicate how we further collaborate. But I can tell you right now, the states that are leading the investigation are working together well, and as we receive the information from subpoenas, we'll be able to better determine where we are and what types of remedies we might be seeking.
Is it going to stop at Facebook?
I can tell you I'm meeting with attorney generals as soon as I leave this interview, and we'll have further announcements today.